I just want to start by saying thank you everyone for joining us for our January quick tips. For those of you who are new, hi, I'm Morgan Stentz. I'm the Roving Archivist for Wyoming. And before we jump into our topic, I would like to remind everyone that today's meeting is recorded and will be available on the Wyoming State Archives YouTube page. And I'd like to thank our sponsors for today. This program is only made possible thanks to the AHC, the Wyoming State Archives, and the Wyoming State Historic Records Advisory Board. This program is funded by grants made available through Wyoming SHRAB by the National Historic Publications and Records Commission and administered by the Wyoming State Archives, Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources. With that being said, I'd like to introduce our newest quick tip session, 5 essential tips for photograph storage and handling. And I would like to welcome Suzi Taylor, our Wyoming State Archives reference archivist, who's going to be presenting today. So, hi, Suzi.
Thanks, Morgan. I'm so excited to be with you guys today. Like Morgan said, I'm a reference archivist with the Wyoming State Archives. And for the last almost 20 years now, I've had the pleasure and sometimes frustration of working with the Wyoming State Archives photo collection. And I've learned a lot, and hopefully some of the things that I've learned today can help you have an easier journey in your own institutions. So today's 5 essentials are: 1, do no more harm. 2, context is key. 3, you can keep anything, but you can't keep everything. And 4, almost always on edge. And 5, surrogacy saves. So do no more harm. Just about everybody's familiar with the Hippocratic Oath that the doctors take, but I feel like we kind of take it in archives as well. So much of our photo collections have inherent vice built into them. And if you're unfamiliar with the term, it's the tendency for materials to deteriorate due to the essential instability or interaction among components. Essentially, the makeup of material is acting against itself. And so we can't make time totally stand still, but we can slow it down. And it's important to kind of be aware of our collections and watch out for signs of deterioration in the collection. One of those is when images get really brittle. So they start to break, they start to just kind of crumble. If it's a negative, maybe the emulsion just starts cracking and pulling away from the plastic. Sometimes you see fading. This wonderful photo just came into us and I love it. And I would love to say that this is just a really bad Photoshop of it, but it's not. As you can tell, I used a color target strip and when I photographed this, and it has faded so bad. You can see around the edge a hint of the original colors, but it's going to take some serious digital work to bring it back to life. Other things that we look for are yellowing, fading, things that just look off, things that don't, things that smell weird. You gotta use your nose in the photo collection sometimes, and then just physical damage too. That's especially important for materials that aren't in boxes or are up against other things. So you're looking for broken glass, things that are sticking off of shelves and have gotten hit by rolling carts, or maybe something got put into a box improperly and maybe it creased or something like that. So we want to try and prevent all of those things, or if we see them, to kind of mitigate them. So the acid-free life. Most times, in order to slow the process of time down, we're going to look for acid-free materials to use with our collection. These are a significant investment, so do your best. And it's usually a good policy to try and first purchase and place acid-free as close to your material as possible, and then kind of work your way out. So if you don't have the budget right now to purchase acid-free boxes, at least purchase acid-free folders to go inside those boxes so that your material isn't in as close a contact with the acidic supplies. Words that you're going to want to look for when you're looking at advertised products. You're going to want to look for acid-free, of course. You're also going to try and look for lignin-free. Lignin is a chemical in wood pulp that can also affect photos. And PAT tested boxes, or PAT tested boxes, and that's photo activity tested. A lot of these gray boxes and tan boxes up here have passed the PAT tests, and those are tests that look for how well a material keeps light out, keeps humidity out, that type of stuff, and whether it reacts with the material that's inside the boxes. Another thing that you may see is buffered versus unbuffered. You usually see this in photonegative sleeves and tissue paper. In most cases, you're going to want to use unbuffered materials. The buffering is a chemical that's added to the paper to kind of counteract the acidity. Unfortunately, that same chemical interacts very badly with color in materials. So you can use buffered papers with black and white photos and negatives, but you do not want to use them with anything with color in it, whether that's hand tinted color or born color materials. I tend to prefer purchasing unbuffered materials just so that there's no question whether I should use this with a black and white or color. But there are very good reasons to use buffered in some cases. But to simplify things, if you're just getting started, start with the unbuffered. So context is key. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but sometimes you got to know the backstory. I came across this photo while processing a new collection recently. And I don't know about you, but my first thought was, why in the world would somebody take a picture of them burying a burrito? And later I came across this, which gave me a little bit more context. And as I learned more about the gentleman who had collected these images, his name was Mark Badgett. He was up in the Sheridan area. He was a local historian. He was also a Bozeman Trail historian and enthusiast. He'd go around to local school groups and give talks on the trail history and local history. And he'd encourage students to write letters to the future. And one of the things that he would do when he went out and hiked the Bozeman Trail is he would bury time capsules. And he'd use essentially any jar or container he could find, and he often wrapped them in foil. This is actually a picture of one of his time capsules and the information about that time capsule. So somewhere buried along the old Bozeman Trail is this knot burrito wrapped in foil. But without the context, if all we had was the first picture, it'd be really hard to make the decision whether or not this needs to stay in the collection. But given the context, given the additional material and the other known stories, this is actually a pretty important picture to keep in the collection. So one of the things that we really want to do when we work with a photo collection is to preserve the provenance. And provenance is just kind of the history of the material. You want to do your best to label all of your images so that you know who they came from and when and what other images came with them. And so we usually suggest that you use collection numbers just like you would with artifacts. Each group of material that comes in gets a collection, and then each item within that would get a number. And then those should be written on the physical image. In this picture, you can see a few variations on how me and my predecessors have written on the back of photos. Some of them are good, some of them we probably wouldn't suggest today, but you work with what you got. So we want to label not only the photo, but also any ancillaries that come with it. So maybe there's a caption that's written on a piece of paper. If it's not attached to the photo, definitely put the photo's number on it. Even if it is attached, but you think the adhesive might fail, put the number on it. If there's a mat, if there's a frame, go ahead and put that number on there, because if at some point in the future those two items are separated, you want to be able to put them back together so you don't just have a stack of frames that are beautiful, but you don't know where they came from. I also suggest using some sort of collection management system to keep track of the information. And I promise, Excel spreadsheets work just fine. You don't have to invest in big things unless you have the budget. If all you have the budget for is an Excel spreadsheet, it will do just fine. For many years here at the State Archives, we used just that. Well, we used a slightly different program. It was called Access, Microsoft Access, but we used it essentially like a spreadsheet. And so you want to keep track of things like the collection number, the item number, a description, dates, locations, people, whether it's been digitized or not, where it's physically located. And it'll save you a lot of time, and it'll also make your collection much easier to use. So albums and scrapbooks. I get this question a lot. Do you keep them together or do you take them apart? And the answer is usually it depends. It depends on what you want to do and what the condition the album's in. In most cases, I default to keeping them together because it preserves the provenance. A person took the time to arrange these photos in a particular way. Sometimes they journaled and added additional information, and I prefer to keep that all together. Is this always foolproof? No. This particular album is, that once again just came in to us, it has very acidic and very brittle black construction paper. The photos themselves are color and they are starting to fade. But this style of photograph is known for fading. The color is not stable, even when properly, and absolutely perfectly stored. So in my valuation, keeping it together as an artifact is more important than taking those images out. But I do have a hate, I will say hate, for these magnetic photo album pages that we love to use in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. They have kind of a waxy adhesive that tends to do really terrible things to photos. We are very fortunate here in Wyoming that our dry climate usually makes that adhesive just dry and crack, and the photos come off usually fairly easily. And so if I can remove them from these pages, I usually do. If I can't easily remove them, I will leave them there and hope that in the next 10 years that adhesive will dry out a little bit more and it'll be easier to remove. So yeah, I won't put the material in danger by removal if just because I don't like this format. But if it's easy to remove, I will remove it. I'll document it first, take a scan, take a picture, so I see how everything was arranged. because once again, you know, you want to keep that provenance, but I will do my best to remove them from pages like this. So marking. So I told you to write on the back of photos, but what do you use? In most cases, my first tool is the number 2 pencil. I prefer mechanical pencils because they stay sharp. I can write really small and legible, and I don't have to take the time to sharpen it constantly. But you can use just a regular sharpened pencil. That is just fine. If that doesn't work, my next choice is the 6B drawing pencils. You can get these at Hobby Lobby, Michael's. You can probably get them at Walmart too, or on Amazon. 6B is a nice soft lead, but not so soft that it crumbles. And so it writes very nicely on the back of the coated papers. So the stuff that kind of feels like a plastic back. But there are times that neither of those will work. And so then we have another option, and that is these little micron pens that you see. Thanks to the Scrapbooking Life, they are much easier to find. But make sure you find one that says it's archival ink and one that doesn't bleed through. You still have to be aware of getting these wet and making sure that it dries properly before you stack items. Otherwise, that wet ink will transfer to other images, and then you've got an issue all over again. If none of those options will work, mark the enclosure. Put it in paper, put it in a sleeve, and write on the sleeve. Try and write small, light, and legible on an edge. Don't write across the middle of the back like they did in some of those pictures, especially for unmounted photos. That can mean that you now have the description right over Aunt Edna's face. It's always right over the face. Try not to do that. Okay, number 3. You can keep anything, but you can't keep everything. Space is always at a premium in archival repositories and in museums. We love preserving things, and you really can keep anything, but you can't keep everything, so you have to have some discernment. And in the photo collections, we have to learn how to spot a good candidate. And you won't get that joke if I don't explain the photo, so I have to explain the photo. This is comedian Gracie Allen and her husband, George Burns. And Gracie was on her campaign tour for president, and she was running on the surprise party. And she's sitting here on the couch with Governor Smith in the historic governor's mansion. So she's telling him what a great candidate she is. But what makes a good candidate for photos? So once again, we're looking for provenance. What is the history of the photo or the person who took the photo? Why is this important to keep for history? We also kind of want to look at the age. Usually the older the material, the less likely there is to have duplicates or other images that would take the place. You also want to look at subject matter. Is this interesting? Is somebody actually going to ask for a photo of this? And the uniqueness. Yes, Artist Point in Yellowstone National Park is beautiful, but it hasn't changed in 200 years. Let's just totally be honest. So do we need to keep every single picture that was ever taken at Artist Point by every single tourist that ever went through the park? No, we don't. But we do need to keep pictures that were taken by individuals of importance. Maybe there was an event that happened at that place and there's something very unique about that picture. And those are our characteristics that would make me more inclined to keep something. The quality of the image. If the image is so faded I cannot see what's going on, I'm probably not going to keep it. If it's a great picture of a little girl, but her she was twirling around and she is so blurred that, you know, it's just really a smudge in a dress. Probably not going to keep it. If it is covered in mold, unless it is, you know, a picture of, I don't know, Tom Horn actually shooting Willie Nickel, I'm not going to keep it. But yeah, so you have to use a little bit of discernment when you go through the photos. And it's okay to say no. No is a healthy word in the archives. And there's many times within the accessioning process and the processing process that we have the opportunity to say no to bad materials. We can decline an offer when it first comes through the door. No, I'm sorry, we don't need more tourist pictures of Yellowstone National Park, and all we have is Artist Point. We can take material in, evaluate it, maybe call out a few and return them to the donor. Thank them for the opportunity to review and hand the material back to them. You can, with the donor's blessing, you can offer it to other repositories. Maybe there are some amazing pictures of the Corn Palace in Mitchell, South Dakota. But we're the Wyoming State Archives. We don't really do Mitchell, South Dakota. And so maybe those photos are better served in a local museum or the South Dakota State Archives. So with the donor's blessing, we can offer to them. We can also, if none of those options really fit, we can also talk to the donor about destroying them. I would suggest if you do destroy and put things in your dumpster at your institution, that you put them in black trash bags. People are very sweet sometimes and will notice things in your trash, and they will have the best of intentions, but they will create a big headache for you if they see a historical institution that's destroying things. They may not understand the process that you went through to get to that point. And to that, always document what you're destroying, how you're destroying it. And so that way, if someone does come back and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe the history of Cokeville, Wyoming is ending up in the trash, you can pull out your documents and go, well, no, you know, this is the process that we did. This is why, you know, these moldy photos that we have 4 other good copies of have ended up in the trash. Thank you very much for your time and concern, but we've got this covered. This particular picture is of a recent donation. We got 3 of those large boxes full of frames, framed pictures of legislative class photos. There were up to 5 copies of some of the images, and they're in rather cheap frames. So I made the decision to unframe a good chunk of them and call out all but 2 copies. So this is what's eventually going to make it into our dumpster because the donor does not want it returned. Almost always on edge. So most photographs will do better stored on edge, especially 8x10 and smaller images. So I took a picture of one of our boxes for a smaller photo storage. We have acid-free folders that hold each of the photos in there. You know, I try to keep them nice and thin, so there aren't a whole lot of photos stacked in there. As you can see, they're vertical, and then I've got foam stacked in the back to keep everything upright. You know, you want to be sure the images are supported. If I were to not put that foam in there, everything would kind of slump, and that's not good for the photos. It's not good for the emulsion. You also want to use appropriate size boxes. Don't put little 2x3 photos into a box, you know, that fits a full-size newspaper. But also, you know, if your box is 8x10 and you have an 11 by 14, don't fold your photo up and put it in there. Find an appropriate size box, and it'll help your images to last a little bit longer. What about unframed over 8 by 10? Those I tend to store flat, just for the logistics. Our shelves aren't really set up to hold something that's that large. So I tend to do flat boxes like this. As you can see, there's acid-free folders that are the size of the box. I like the boxes to have a drop down front because it's easier to access those folders. This one I actually modified. It's one of those metal edge boxes, and so I was able to take off 2 of the edges. And since the lid on the box goes all the way down, I'm still not letting much light in there. The dust and whatnot shouldn't get in there too bad either. But as you can see, I've also labeled the folders so I can quickly go through those to find the one that I want. I would suggest, if at all possible, not to use map cases to store photographs. When you access things in map cases, a lot of times you kind of bend them up to flip through them, and that is not good for the emulsion, the kind of the top layer of a photo that has the image in it. It tends to crack really bad when that happens. It can also encourage the photos to slide around, kind of knock at each other. Sometimes if you have cardboard that's a little more brittle, that bend will actually crack it, and you'll do more damage. So when possible, try and find something other than a map case. And they do make the acid-free photo boxes very large. If that doesn't work, there are actually videos up online on how to create custom boxes. I made some for our panoramic photos because there just wasn't a decent way to store those for us. Albums and scrapbooks. Those we also want to store flat. If you were to store them up on an edge, a lot of times that paper is just not sturdy enough, and sometimes the albums have floppy covers that don't give enough support. So we want to store those on the edge, but we don't want to stack too many up on top of each other because that pressure can damage the emulsion on the photo. I like to wrap them in tissue paper, and then I can write on the tissue paper what it is, so I don't have to constantly be unwrapping and rewrapping. I do usually use unbuffered tissue paper for this, for the same reasons we talked about earlier. Beware of the fan with scrapbooks. So when a book has too much material in it for the binding, it'll kind of fan up. And if you put too much pressure on that fan to kind of push it down, it can hurt the binding. So just kind of beware of putting too much pressure on those, and use a box that's appropriately sized to account for that. There are also times where removing the binding from an album is necessary. Some of those albums that have black construction paper on them, the paper is just, it gets so brittle from being opened and closed that it can tear right along the binding line. And so sometimes removing those strings and storing it as loose pages stacked up is easier on the material. In most of those cases, I'll take a pencil and write really tiny in the corner and number the pages so that I know that they'll stay in order. Yeah, and I usually keep the binding with it. So if I take a string out of an album, I'll take a negative sleeve, one of the paper negative sleeves, and just tuck it in there and write the collection number on there, and keep it with the materials. You can also interleave materials with albums with unbuffered tissue paper to help prevent the photos from kind of rubbing on each other. But beware that that does add bulk. It feels like a tissue paper isn't going to add anything, but when you stack 50 sheets of that up, it is still going to create some bulk in there. So just beware of what that's doing to the binding of your album. Let's see. And if you need to, you can use ethafoam to or acid-free cardboard to help fill up spaces in your box so things don't shake around quite so much. There's it's kind of hard to tell in this picture, but this bottom kind of log is a roll of ethafoam. Framed pictures. So I mentioned it earlier, but this is one of the state legislature kind of class photos that we had gotten in. And framed photos can be an interesting challenge. Frames have a lot of bulk in them, and they can get damaged easily on the shelf. Also, framed photos usually have glass in them, and that glass can get kind of touchy. What if it breaks? Is it going to scratch the photo? Chances are yes. And it's also going to create a hazard for staff. So I usually ask myself a few questions before choosing to keep a frame. And those are, does the frame have value of its own? So in this case, no. You know, this is a mass-produced, cheap black frame. It's not an interesting size. It wasn't custom created. But we do have some frames in the collection that do have value of their own. One of our large photo collections is a photographer named Joseph Stimson. And one of the things that Stimson did when he created his more artistic prints was he would custom frame them, and then he would paint the frame to enhance the image. And so keeping those frames is important. And I would much rather prioritize my storage space to keep those frames than to keep these black frames. So the choice was made to remove these. Does the frame add to the story or enjoyment of the image? In this case, no, not really. Does the frame contain materials that will speed degradation or actively harm the image? So we're talking broken glass, wooden backings, and rust. We do actually have some metal frames, and not like the little brass frames, but like iron frames in the collection. And so I do have to monitor those for rust sometimes. And if the frame is of value and it does add to the story and enjoyment of the image, but it contains materials that are actively harming the image, you can keep the frame and still unframe the image. Just make sure you document that it was unframed. Make sure the collection number is on both items, and then you can store them in two very separate places. Just make sure in your collection management system that you note that there is a frame, and on your frame you note that there is actually an image that goes with it. If you do choose to keep things in a frame, you can put them on a shelf. Usually you want to store them on edge, and you want to use ethafoam. If you can't store them vertically, and you do have to store them horizontally, try and put the smaller frames on the bottom and kind of stack them up from there. If you put the larger frame on the bottom, the smaller frames will put too much weight on the glass, and the glass has a better likelihood of breaking, and that's not good for anybody. These are a couple of examples of how we store some of our kind of small and medium-sized framed images. This shelving unit up here is actually a bunch of the frames that were at Ranch A. They're in those half-log frames that were designed by Thomas Molesworth, who is a rather famous furniture maker from the 1930s and 40s up in the Sheridan area. And so it was important that the frames be kept. In this case, we do still have the prints in those frames, and they're wrapped up in ethafoam. This detail down here is kind of from the next shelf over, and you can see that we have a tag on there so that I know what's in the foam. And then I actually printed off a color image of what that picture looks like, so I don't constantly have to unload or unwrap things. It keeps the shelves much tidier, and it means that I can flip through kind of like a record collection and see, you know, which our greatest hits are. So last but not least, we have surrogacy saves. Duplication is probably our best tool to preserve our photo collection. The less an image sees the light, the longer it's probably going to survive. When you're able, creating copies that can be used by researchers or displayed in museum exhibits is the best way to go. And you've got options. If a collection comes in and there's 2 copies of everything, maybe 1 copy is your research print and 1 copy is the original that stays in storage. It's a lot less likely today that we'd have access to a darkroom to create copy negatives and prints, but I put it on there just in case. And then photocopies are a possibility. You just have to be really careful of the light exposure. Photocopiers, even though it's an LED light, it is a very strong light that goes all the way across that photo. And if you're constantly photocopying something, you could be fading that photo very quickly. Black and white photos are much more light stable than color. There have been so many different color processes, and so many of them are not light stable. Some of them, you know, you can store in the dark and they're still going to fade really bad. Especially with color, be sure you limit the exposure to light in any way you can. If you have some hanging up in your exhibit space now, some originals, you might consider digitizing those and putting up a really nice surrogate. Most people won't notice, and it'll prolong the life of your collection so that other people can enjoy the beautiful colors and you don't get a portrait like what we saw at the beginning. Digital, as I mentioned, is probably the most popular anymore way to duplicate. And it's always better to do it right the first time. Granted, that is a moving target. But at this point, I would suggest you create a high resolution raw master. So that is digitizing and not doing anything to it at a high resolution. So at least 600 DPI. If you can go higher, great. It will take up more storage space. And sometimes that's at a premium. So you have to find the balance that works for your institution. It's better to digitize even the black and whites using color settings rather than black and white, but it is going to take up probably 3 times the space that a black and white scan will take up. So, you know, once again, you have to be aware of kind of the balance for your institution. I would suggest TIFF files. They're a non-compression format, which means that every time you open it and save it, it stays exactly the same. File formats like a JPEG, there's an algorithm built in that every time you save it, the computer goes, you know, the human eye can't see this pixel and this pixel and this pixel. And so it takes those and it gets rid of them. And the first couple of times you save it, you might not notice, but by like the third and fourth time, you're going to start to see a degradation of the image. So for your master, you want to do something like a TIFF. And then we usually, in addition to that raw master, we have a derivative master. So that's where I take that high resolution image and I do all the things to it to make it prettier. So like in the case of these two images, the first one up here at the top is a raw scan of a negative. This one happens to be one of our nitrate negatives from the Kerrigan collection. So the entire image is visible. We can see what it physically looks like. And then our wonderful scanning tech was able to go in, invert it, adjust the light levels a little bit so that it's more recognizable as an image and a better representation of what the artist intended. So this would be our high resolution raw master. This is our high resolution derivative. And then just a second. And then from that derivative, we would create a low resolution access copy. Because this file is such a big file, it's hard to send by email. It's hard to put into PowerPoint presentations. It's hard to use on websites, and it takes up a lot of network storage space or online platform storage space. So we create low resolution access copies that load a lot faster, are easier to work with. And so for us, those are usually JPEGs. We usually size them down to about 10 inches at the longest dimension. And then we'll also adjust the resolution so it's not quite as large a file. 200 DPI is usually about what folks will need for PowerPoint. Online, I usually go with about 96 DPI. But even those are kind of changing as screens get more high def. And the digital march of progress. So even after digitization, I do recommend you keep the original because technology will improve. This is a lovely picture of our former archive supervisor here helping a student look at an old newspaper on microfilm. Today, we have troubles with some of those newspapers that are on microfilm because the quality of the images is sometimes lacking. But because the originals have been destroyed, we can't go back and adjust those. And I'd really hate for that to happen with your photo collections. So whenever possible, continue to keep the original. There are some cases where you might want to get rid of the original. And those are usually because of safety issues. So extreme mold is probably one of the biggest. And then if there's some reason that they have they might create a danger to the rest of the collection or the staff. So sometimes severely degraded negatives are kind of one of the things that may make it so that they're just not salvageable. Okay, so that's all I have. Does anybody have any questions?
Susan? My questions are about slides. I found a bunch of slides up in our archives.
Okay. Do you have a specific question about slides? Sorry.
I mean, is there best practices for storage or for digitization? I mean, just what would you do if you found a bunch of slides? What would be some steps you?
Okay, so kind of one of the first things I do is I look through and see, is this something we already have? How many of these are duplicates or very similar? And what are they pictures of? One of the good things about slides is that the film that was used is one of the most stable color formats that's been invented. So most slides will keep their color better than other like color negatives or prints. So that's one of the good things about them. One of the bad things about them is that they were very inexpensive and easy to produce. And so people tended to make a lot of them. So I would go through and especially with new collections that come in, sometimes our hands are tied a little bit more with collections that you already have. But especially with new collections, go in and really evaluate it and really take a serious look and see if there's any that can be culled out. And then storage wise, I usually take them out of carousels. Carousels are super bulky. And honestly, we just don't use them on projectors anymore. They have, just a moment. Okay, Chantal. So this is a new collection of slides that we got in. Each of these little, I call them cracker boxes. I'm not really sure what their actual term is. But there are these little boxes, and they'll hold between 200 and 250 slides in this little teeny box. And I can put little, sorry, the image is kind of blown out here, but I can put dividers in there to kind of delineate where presentations are or subjects are. And then they have lids that just fit on top, and I can fit 6 of those into a box. And much like my favorite flat boxes, these boxes have a drop front. Sorry. Okay, there we go. So the front drops down, and I can label each one of these so that I know exactly what's in it. And that way I don't have to open everything up and dig through every single slide. So I really like these. I think it's a really efficient way to store slides. If you think you're going to be accessing them more frequently, or people are going to be flipping through them a lot, consider the plastic like slide file, almost like sheet protectors that have little pockets in them. I have a love-hate relationship with them because if moisture gets in there, it could really damage the slide. But if you know that a collection is going to be handled very frequently, it will save save the slides themselves from people, you know, poking at them. Oh, the other thing I forgot to mention, always wear gloves. When you handle photographs. The oils on your skin are really hard on photographs and photographic material. They're really prone to getting fingerprints on them. I would suggest nitrile gloves. In the past, we used to use white cotton gloves. And while you can still use those, they tend to create static. They can be kind of rough, and you just aren't as, the dexterity just isn't there. So get some nice nitrile gloves that fit you well. We stock 4 different sizes: small, medium, large, and extra large. And that way our staff members have some that fit properly. And it helps handling materials a lot easier. But anyway, sorry about that. Back to slides. Susan, did you have any other questions about the slides?
The only other question I have is, do you ever digitize slides?
Yes,
or
all the time.
Okay.
Yeah, you digitize them similar to a negative. There are scanners that can digitize negatives as well as slides. I prefer flatbed scanners that have a slide adapter rather than a dedicated slide scanner. I think it's a you get better bang for your buck because you can use the scanner for multiple things. Epson right now is probably the best brand for that. They're still a little on the pricey side, but they also build in compatibility with their drivers and software. So the one that I'm currently looking at right now, our department purchased probably 2003, 2004, and I can still use it with our modern computers because Epson keeps those drivers up. And honestly, it is a workhorse. So they're pricey but worth the investment. And we do digitize them. One thing that you would adjust with your settings is you'd probably increase the output size because slides are tiny, and your image is usually, you know, what, 1 inch by 2 inches maybe. And so even if you increase the resolution, it'll eventually make it a little blurry. So there is a way to go in and adjust the settings so that your output size, so I usually do like a 5x7 or an 8x10, and then have it at 600 dpi. And they come out really nice and clear. But you just have to play around with it.
Thank you so much.
Suzi, can you, oh, sorry, I interrupted. Sierra has a question. I can wait.
You sure?
Well, I'll just say, can you order this stuff through like Gaylord or other archival supplies, or do you have to go to like different suppliers?
Yeah, Gaylord, Archival Methods, University products, and sometimes you can find them on Amazon too. Just be sure that you're looking for acid-free, lignin-free, photo-safe, archival. Those are all good key terms to look for. And if you have any questions about those things, you know, drop Morgan a line, and I'm sure she can give you some great suggestions or help you evaluate a product to see whether it's something you should invest in.
Okay.
What you got, Sierra?
So as a small institution that does have slides, but doesn't have the boxes yet, how else would you put them away, I guess? What, you know?
Yeah. Well, you could put them in envelopes. You know, it kind of depends on what materials you have at your disposal. If all you have is photo negative sleeves like this and records boxes, you could put some of them in here, kind of the way that I have it grouped in those cracker boxes. I can put some in here and write all my descriptions on here and then put them in the box kind of in order. Be aware that you don't want to crush them in there or put them in too tight because it could mangle your slides. But that is one way to keep them organized. If they're coming in those plastic like print view sheet protectors, keep them in there and keep them in a binder. Or if you don't like the binders, because I tend to not like binders, put them in a flat box or in a records box and just store it on its side. Yeah, use what you got until you can afford to do better.
Understandable. Yeah, where they're at right now, because we got them from a school, they put it in a Ziploc bag, and I'm like, bruh. Like, no, we can't do that.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to find like a better way to like preserve them.
Yeah.
But okay, that's a good idea. My second question, though, I'm not sure if it really lines up with photography, is drawings. So we have drawings in our archives, and I'm not sure how to, like, I guess, properly store them because they're big. They're pretty big. We got one that's full charcoal, other one's pencil, another one is colored crayons and we got one that's both pencil and pen.
Oh,
So
wow.
I guess how would you, what would you do with those really? And I don't think I have big boxes for them, which sucks. We need to buy more. But yeah, for the time being, because one of them is like starting to curl.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if they were photos, and I will say that that is definitely something I would chat with a museum artifact folk. But if they were photos, what I would do is I would sandwich them between pieces of cardboard, and I'd be sure that there's acid-free photo or acid-free paper on both sides, so it's not in contact with the cardboard. But sandwiching between that cardboard will keep it nice and flat. And then you can either create a hinge with tape, or you can use like some cotton twill tape to kind of tie it up so that the sandwich stays together. And then you can store it flat on a shelf, or it's probably preferable that it's flat, but if you have to, you could store it vertical. But I'd probably try and store them flat whenever you can. And if you have to use just regular cardboard for now, use regular cardboard. Just make sure that there's acid-free paper between that cardboard and your drawing, and put some notes in around to periodically, kind of every year or two, check on it to make sure that that acid-free paper isn't starting to turn yellow or something. And if it is, maybe that's the time to consider getting some acid-free cardboard if you've got the budget, or just replace that acid-free paper. But yeah, I would double check with the museum folks, but if it was a photo and that was my option, that's what I would do. I would find a way to sandwich it and then store it flat.
Okay. Thank you for that. I will have to look into that. My final question.
Yeah.
So we got a photograph and it's a panorama. Very old. I am not entirely sure how to properly preserve it, and it was rolled up for a very long time, and it's a picture of these soldiers. I really gotta see if they were part of the Buffalo Soldiers. Ooh. Or if there's something else. I have to double go back on our deed of gift and stuff to see what it really is. But it's big. It's big. Mm-hmm. It has its own shelf, is what I put it on. But I need to get it flat, because as of right now, I do have it flat. It's just I've been using we have that foam for the bottom, and I did put acid-free tissue paper on top because we do have that. And then I kind of just used mason jars on top of that stuff to keep it as flat as I can. But how would you properly store a panorama, I guess?
Yeah, so panoramas are very difficult because they are so big and so unwieldy. In that case, I treat them kind of like those drawings. Get some cardboard and make a sandwich. You can even use that same ethifoam on the bottom and then the tissue on the top, and that'll kind of sandwich it. Now, if the photo has started to curl enough that it isn't comfortable relaxing flat, we might have to talk about humidifying it and being a little bit more gentle with how you flatten it. There are ways to do that, and you can definitely get a hold of me and we can talk about those. But just don't force panoramas flat. The paper does tend to crack really easily. And those of you that have the panoramas that are like rolled into a roll, don't force those flat because it will crack that emulsion and you really can't uncrack it and you really can't fix it. So if you do want to look at those, kind of unroll it a little bit at a time like you would a scroll, and get with me later and we can talk about how to create a humidification chamber to gently help it relax, and then get it to where you can you can store it flat. But the way we store them here is I built some big custom boxes. You can buy them, but they are just so expensive that the budget didn't quite, it wasn't in the budget. And so we had some spare cardboard, the acid-free box cardboard around. So I found a tutorial online on how to make a custom size box, and I made some for the panoramas, and that's how we store them. And I have tissue paper in there. But yeah, it's doable to flatten them.
Luckily, it wasn't rolled up tight, or else I would not have done that. It was a pretty chunky little
Nice.
size roll. And so far it has not cracked. It does smooth out. It's just the ends that really do it. And
Yeah.
but do you think I should let it naturally roll back up until I can humidify it, or just leave it as is?
No, I would leave it as is, or find a nice sheet of cardboard so that you've got something to put on top, like on top of that, the tissue paper. And that'll also help distribute the weight. Even if you do continue to use the mason jars, that the cardboard will distribute the weight of those mason jars, so that like the corners will stay flat, and the edges will stay flat. Because I'm sure with those jars leave corners that still kind of want to like come up and grab you. So, but yeah, do what you can for now, and yeah, when the budget allows, do something better.
I would love to get in contact with you on how to make a humidifier, because that would be really wonderful.
Yeah,
to do.
you can do them, you know, fairly inexpensively. And yeah, I'd love to walk you through that. So yeah, get with me later and we can chat about that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely. Anybody else? Well, this is my contact information. And if you guys do have any questions, feel free to reach out to Morgan or me, and we'll try and answer any questions you have.
I'm going to have you leave that up for another second to make sure everybody gets the contact information. Yes, I wanted to say thank you, Suzi, so much for presenting. These were truly helpful, and I loved all of the questions and how I learned some things from this actually. And so I know some people have to go, but does everybody who wants Suzi's contact have it at the moment? Okay, I'm getting a lot of head nods.
Okay.
So I'm going to switch over real quick.
Okay.
Because as it is now 2026 and we are in a new year, I just want to gauge how this program is serving all of you, and really get a sense of how we can improve the Quick Tips program. And so if you guys don't mind, I have this survey that I am also linking in the chat right now. And if you guys will take just a minute or two and fill out the survey just to give me some feedback, that would be amazing. This program is built for you guys and to help you with the topics and issues and collection stewardship questions that come up during your everyday tasks. And so I just want to gauge how we can further improve and continue on with this program. So I'll leave this up for a minute, but I want to say thank you all for participating, and I am going to go ahead and end the recording now. So thank you guys.